Schopenhauer. He grasped something that the vast majority of people spend their entire lives failing to see. Our desires do not set us free. They are the very chains that bind us. And by the end of this, you will understand exactly why. Schopenhauer devoted years to the study of human nature and arrived at a deeply unsettling conclusion. We are not guided by reason or conscious choice. We are driven by a blind, relentless force he called the will. This force does not think. It does not deliberate. It holds no interest in whether you are happy or at peace. It simply wants. It wants food, it wants pleasure, it wants status, it wants to be recognized. And it never reaches a point of satisfaction. Right now, as you listen to this, that force is alive inside you, pushing you forward toward the next milestone, the next objective. You did not choose to carry this will. It arrived with you. It operates beneath the surface of your awareness, shaping your decisions in ways you rarely stop to examine. Consider the way your mornings begin. Even before you open your eyes, your mind is already running. There is a list forming, things to accomplish, problems to resolve, goals to chase. That restlessness you feel is not a personal failure. It is the will refusing to allow stillness. It manufactures needs where none existed before. It takes what was once a luxury and quietly reclassifies it as a necessity. It convinces you that something you had never heard of last year is now essential to your life. This is the human condition. There is no complete escape from it. But there is a way to see it clearly, and seeing it clearly changes everything. The trap becomes most visible the moment a desire is fulfilled. Take something straightforward. You want a new phone. For weeks your mind orbits around it. You compare models, study reviews, imagine how good that camera will be. The day you finally buy it, the feeling is real. But how long does it last? 2 days? Perhaps a week? Before long, the device that felt like a solution is just another object sitting in a drawer. And somewhere out there, a newer version has already been announced. Now that is the one you want. The cycle begins again without missing a beat. This pattern exists because the human brain was never designed for contentment. It was designed for survival. And survival, from an evolutionary standpoint, has always required wanting more. The ancestors who felt satisfied with what they had did not push further, did not accumulate more resources, did not outcompete those who kept striving. The ones who passed their genes forward were the ones who were never quite satisfied. You are their descendant. That undercurrent of restlessness running through you is not a flaw. It is an inheritance. But here is where nature reveals its cruelty. In the gap between wanting something and actually obtaining it, there is suffering. Your mind locks onto the object of desire and will not let go. You think about it when you wake up, when you are supposed to be focused on something else, when you are trying to sleep. It drains your mental energy. You grow irritable when anything stands between you and what you want. You lose patience with people, lose sleep to plans, and lose peace to anticipation. All of that anxiety, all of that agitation, is suffering wearing the disguise of motivation. Schopenhauer described this as the state of lack. You are not whole until you possess that thing. But since there is always something you do not yet have, wholeness never truly arrives. You are perpetually incomplete, perpetually reaching, and the brief window of relief that follows getting what you wanted closes almost before you notice it opened. The next desire is already forming. It is like crossing a desert desperate for water. You find a source, you drink, the relief floods through you. But the thirst comes back. It always comes back. Now consider something that most people never think about. There is a condition worse than wanting something you cannot have. It is wanting nothing at all. Schopenhauer observed that when a person manages to satisfy all of their immediate desires, they do not land in happiness. They fall into boredom. You may have experienced a version of this yourself. A free weekend with no obligations, no deadlines, no goals. And instead of feeling rested, you feel hollow. That hollowness is not trivial. The mind requires pursuit. It needs something to move toward. Strip that away and disorientation sets in quickly. This is precisely why so many people who appear to have everything are quietly miserable. They reached the destinations they had been chasing for years. And upon arrival, they found that the wanting had disappeared, but the peace they expected had not shown up to replace it. Boredom moved in instead. They respond by inventing new desires, buying things they have no real use for, engineering extreme experiences, anything to fill the silence that satisfaction left behind. Because the emptiness that follows the end of pursuit is more painful than the striving ever was. In the chase, at least there is a sense of direction. In the emptiness, there is only the realization that the chase itself may have been the point, and that the destination never held what was promised. So the situation is this. We oscillate between two distinct forms of suffering. The suffering of wanting what we do not have, and the suffering of having what we wanted and finding it meaningless. Schopenhauer described human existence as a pendulum swinging endlessly between pain and boredom. We move from one pole to the other, pausing only briefly in the narrow space between them, and those pauses are so fleeting we rarely register them before the swing begins again. This dynamic plays out with particular intensity in the world we currently inhabit. We live inside a system built on consumption, and that system depends entirely on your dissatisfaction. Corporations invest billions not into products but into the psychology of desire. Every advertisement is a carefully engineered signal that your life as it stands is not enough. Social media platforms show you a continuous stream of lives that appear more polished, more exciting, more fulfilled than your own, and they do this deliberately, because a person who feels inadequate is a person who keeps scrolling, keeps buying, keeps consuming. Look at the way cars are sold. No manufacturer shows you a vehicle and says here is reliable transportation. They show you admiration. They show you a version of yourself that others look at with envy and respect. They are not selling metal and machinery. They are selling the feeling of being seen in a particular way. And when you make the purchase, you discover that the feeling evaporates almost immediately. You are still the same person, carrying the same uncertainties, the same insecurities, except now with a larger monthly payment. But the advertisement for the next model is already running somewhere. Retailers have refined this further with the engineering of artificial scarcity. Limited time only. Final units remaining. These phrases are not informational. They are designed to compress your decision-making, to push you past the point of reflection, because reflection is dangerous to the system. If you stop and genuinely ask yourself whether you need something, the honest answer is usually no. So the goal is to prevent that pause. To keep you feeling urgency, shortage, pressure. To create just enough discomfort that purchasing becomes a form of relief. This entire machine operates on the exact mechanism Schopenhauer identified in the 19th century, the blind will, and its structural inability to arrive at satisfaction. The more you feed it, the more demanding it becomes. Each purchase provides diminishing returns. The relief gets shorter. The next desire arrives faster. The pattern mirrors addiction precisely because it is one. But material consumption is only the most visible layer. Go deeper and the same structure appears in places we tend to think of as more meaningful. Consider relationships. An enormous number of people enter romantic relationships carrying an unspoken belief that this other person will resolve something internal. You encounter someone, the attraction is immediate, and the mind begins constructing an image. This person will make you happy. This person will fill the space you have been aware of for years. This person will give your life a shape it currently lacks. You build a detailed internal portrait and then wait for the real human being to step into it. When they inevitably fail to match the portrait, because no real person can, the result is frustration, conflict, and resentment. You blame them for not being what you needed. But the need was never something they could have met. You were asking someone outside you to resolve something that lives inside you. Schopenhauer would say you were attempting to use another person as a sedative for the will. But the will does not sedate. It redirects. This is why so many relationships begin with overwhelming intensity and quietly hollow out over time. The initial passion is simply desire at high volume. Once desire reaches its object, the question becomes what is actually underneath. If there is depth, something real can remain. If there is not, boredom arrives and people begin looking elsewhere. They move from one relationship to the next in search of that original charge, changing partners the way they change devices, convinced each time that this one will be different. Rarely is it different, because the variable they refuse to examine is themselves. No relationship will complete a person who is empty. That is not pessimism. It is a structural fact. Another human being cannot carry the weight of your existential void. Placing that expectation on someone does not give the relationship a chance. It condemns it. The same logic extends to professional life. Most people have told themselves some version of the story: once I get that position, once the salary reaches a certain number, once the title changes, I will finally feel settled. And so they work for it, sacrifice for it, measure their worth against it. They get it. The satisfaction is real but brief. Within weeks, the eyes are already moving upward, toward the next level, the next benchmark. This is what ambition actually is, in Schopenhauer's framing. Not a virtue but a treadmill. Always in motion, never covering ground, burning energy toward a finish line that relocates the moment you approach it. Society frames this relentlessness as admirable. It calls it drive, resilience, hunger. Schopenhauer would simply describe it as a person who has been convinced that stopping is the same as losing. The hierarchy is climbed and the problems do not disappear. They change their form. The pressures shift. The demands evolve. But the sense of arrival, the feeling of having made it, never settles in the way that was imagined. Because the career was never really the point. Underneath the ambition was something more personal, the need to prove something, to justify something, to become something that would finally feel like enough. And that proof, when sought from the outside, never quite is. And then there is the modern amplifier that Schopenhauer could not have anticipated but would have understood immediately. Social media. He never encountered Instagram or its equivalents, but his analysis maps onto them with unsettling precision. You open a platform and the feed presents you with a version of the world in which everyone else is traveling somewhere beautiful, celebrating something significant, inhabiting a body they are comfortable in, living inside a relationship that appears uncomplicated and warm. You set this beside your actual life, with its ordinary difficulties and unglamorous stretches, and the comparison produces a specific kind of pain. Envy. The ache of inadequacy. The suspicion that everyone else received something you somehow missed. Each image functions as a reminder of what you do not have. Each post activates a new desire, for that life, that place, that body, that version of connection. But none of it is what it appears to be. No one posts the argument that happened an hour before the smiling photograph. The body you are envying is the product of specific lighting, particular angles, and a filter applied afterward. The trip you are coveting generated a debt that will take years to resolve. You are measuring your unedited reality against other people's carefully constructed highlight reels, and that comparison will never resolve in your favor because it is not designed to. Social media transformed the human tendency to compare into something industrial. Previously, comparison was bounded. Your neighbor, your colleagues, the people in your immediate orbit. Now the reference group is the entire connected world. Celebrities, influencers, strangers in countries you have never visited, all of them feeding a continuous stream of things to want and ways to fall short. The surface area of possible desire expanded beyond anything that existed before, and the suffering expanded with it. And there is a further complication. You are not only a consumer of this content. You are also a producer. You select your best photographs. You post your strongest moments. You build your own fiction. And in doing so, you widen the gap between who you are and the version of yourself you perform online. You begin living in orientation to metrics, calibrating your behavior around likes and comments, finding that your sense of worth has quietly migrated to depend on the approval of people you have never met. Each notification becomes a small reward. Each silence becomes a small wound. The mechanism is identical to any other form of conditioning. You have handed the controls of your inner state to an anonymous audience, and that audience will never be consistent enough or generous enough to provide what you are looking for. Schopenhauer would identify this immediately as a form of imprisonment. Your peace is now contingent on external judgment, and external judgment cannot be controlled. There will always be criticism. There will always be dismissal. Every piece of negative feedback lands hard because your identity has been constructed around an image, and images are fragile. The distance between who you actually are and the character you have been performing grows quietly, until you find yourself not quite sure which one is real. So what can be done? Schopenhauer was not a man who offered easy comfort, but he did identify several genuine paths forward. The first is understanding. Not as an intellectual exercise but as a lived practice. You cannot destroy the will. It is part of the architecture of being human. But you can stop identifying with every impulse it produces. You can create a small but significant gap between the arising of a desire and your response to it. When you feel something pulling you toward the next acquisition, the next achievement, the next comparison, you can pause. You can observe the pull without immediately obeying it. You can ask honestly whether following it will bring something real, or whether it is simply the next rotation of a wheel that has been spinning your entire life. The mechanism for quieting the will, according to Schopenhauer, is simplification. Reducing what you need. Every want you consciously decline is a small piece of freedom recovered. This is the actual substance of minimalism, not an aesthetic or a trend, but a deliberate choice about what is worth your time, your money, and your attention. When you stop running toward 100 things simultaneously, something unusual happens. Space opens in the mind. A quietness arrives that you may not have felt in years. The anxiety that came from measuring yourself against what you lacked begins to loosen. You find that what you already have, when it is not constantly compared to what you do not, turns out to be sufficient. It always was. The scarcity was never in the circumstances. It was in the orientation. Schopenhauer also pointed to art and aesthetic contemplation as one of the few reliable interruptions of the will's momentum. When you encounter something genuinely beautiful and allow yourself to be absorbed in it, something shifts. The internal narrator goes quiet. The list of things you want or need or worry about recedes. For a few moments you are not a person pursuing anything. You are simply present, receiving what is in front of you. This can happen through music, through visual art, through time spent in natural landscapes, through any experience that pulls you fully into the present moment and out of the planning mind. What matters is not the form but the quality of attention. In those moments the will suspends itself, and what remains in its absence is a stillness that no purchase has ever produced. It is genuine because it costs nothing and depends on nothing external. Compassion offers another form of relief, and perhaps a less obvious one. When you begin to understand that every other person you encounter is caught inside the same structure, driven by the same blind force, struggling with the same oscillation between craving and boredom, something in your stance toward them shifts. The person who frustrated you this morning is not your adversary. They are someone trying to manage the same machinery you are. The colleague who seems difficult, the stranger who seems irritating, the figure you envy online, all of them are navigating the same condition. Some attempt to quiet their will through the accumulation of power. Others through money. Others through pleasure or distraction. The specific strategy varies, but the underlying situation is identical. This recognition does not solve the problem, but it removes the layer of personal grievance that usually sits on top of it. You become less reactive, less defended, more capable of moving through friction without being defined by it. And as attention to your own desires decreases, a kind of lightness tends to follow. The minimalist movement that has gained significant traction in recent years is drawing directly from this well, whether or not those practicing it know Schopenhauer's name. People are divesting themselves of objects, scaling back their obligations, creating more space in their homes and their schedules. And consistently they report the same outcomes: less anxiety, more clarity, a greater sense of having time for what genuinely matters. This is the practical application of the philosophical principle. Less will, less suffering. The relationship between the two is not complicated, but a necessary clarification. None of this is an argument for deprivation or for the elimination of pleasure. The goal is not to want nothing. The goal is to not be enslaved by wanting. You can have desires. You can pursue things. The critical variable is attachment. When the achievement of a specific outcome becomes the condition for your peace, you have already begun to suffer. Every obstacle becomes catastrophic. Every delay becomes unbearable. But when you can move towards something while genuinely remaining open to not getting it, when you can engage fully with a process without staking your well-being on the result, the experience is entirely different. Consider an exam. You can prepare seriously, want to pass, and do everything within your capacity to succeed. If your happiness is entirely conditional on a particular outcome, the anxiety begins the moment you register for it and does not end regardless of the result. But if you can want to pass while simultaneously holding space for the possibility that you might not, if you have thought through what comes next either way, if you understand that you will be all right regardless, the same preparation happens with far less suffering. The difference is not in the effort. It is in the grip. Releasing that grip does not happen automatically. It requires practice, and it requires a willingness to question conditioning that runs very deep. Entire cultural systems are built around the message that control is possible, that planning eliminates uncertainty, that the right strategy guarantees the right outcome. The actual truth is that you control almost nothing. The one thing that does fall within your influence is how you respond to what happens. Here is the hardest truth of all. You are going to die. Everything you have accumulated, the possessions, the status, the approval you worked to collect, none of it accompanies you. The car stays. The house stays. The social media profile stays. You do not. Schopenhauer did not treat this as a morbid thought but as a clarifying one. When everything is acknowledged as temporary, the question of how much suffering is worth directing toward temporary things becomes genuinely urgent. Does it make sense to spend years of your life in anguish over outcomes that will not last regardless? Does postponing your sense of being alive until some future condition is met serve any real purpose? This is not a pessimistic conclusion. It is a liberating one. Accepting impermanence loosens the grip. The present moment, which you know will not return, becomes more worth inhabiting. You stop deferring your life to a future version of yourself who has finally acquired everything. You begin to recognize that the state you have been associating with future achievement is actually available now, not through acquiring but through releasing. Goals remain worth having. Dreams remain worth pursuing. The distinction lies in the source of the motivation. Working towards something because it genuinely corresponds to your values, because the process itself has meaning to you, because it connects to who you actually are rather than who you believe you need to perform. That is a fundamentally different activity than chasing what the culture around you has decided matters. And if you do not reach the destination, the ground does not disappear beneath you. The value was in the movement itself, in what you learned, in who you became in the process, not only in whether you arrived. What Schopenhauer proposed was a quieter, more examined way of inhabiting a life. Less automatic striving, more genuine reflection. Less compulsive accumulation, more direct experience. Less clinging, more presence. This is not the path of least resistance. Everything around you is designed to pull you in the opposite direction. But it is a path along which the suffering is measurably reduced. At the core of it is recognition. You are inside a game whose fundamental rule is that the more intensely you want, the more acutely you suffer. Simply knowing this changes your relationship to the game. You can choose to want less. You can practice noticing what you already have. You can let the race continue around you without requiring yourself to be in it. And the paradox that appears at the end of this line of thinking is genuine. When you stop frantically pursuing happiness, it surfaces more often. When you no longer need the approval of others to feel stable, others tend to extend more respect. When you hold things lightly, you enjoy them more fully. The image Schopenhauer might have used is sand in the hand. The tighter the fist, the faster it falls through. Open the hand and it stays. This is the teaching that has appeared across centuries and traditions under different names. Detachment. Not indifference, not the rejection of pleasure, but the refusal to make your identity contingent on possession. You can have. You can enjoy. You simply cannot depend. Because possession is temporary. You are temporary. Everything moves. The only thing that does not change is that everything changes. Schopenhauer lived inside these conclusions. He had resources but chose simplicity. He had considerable intellectual standing but declined to pursue celebrity. He spent long hours in reflection, in writing, in direct engagement with the questions that seemed most essential. He was not performing a life for anyone else. He was trying to understand what one actually was. And his findings, though they offer no comfort of the easy kind, are honest in a way that most accounts of human happiness are not. He does not promise that the right method will bring wealth or fame or the admiration of strangers. He shows you the structure of the situation as it actually is. Suffering is woven into human experience. You cannot extract it entirely. But you can reduce your exposure to it considerably. You can make choices from awareness rather than from compulsion. You can stop working against yourself by chasing things that will not deliver what you are really looking for. You can build something smaller, quieter, and genuinely your own. The beginning of that is honesty. Acknowledging that the next purchase will not settle the feeling you are trying to settle. That the number of people who approve of your photograph does not establish your worth. That the title or the salary will not fill the specific emptiness you have been carrying. When you stop looking for those things in those places, you become available to find them somewhere else. And the somewhere else is almost always simpler than expected. It tends to be a real conversation. A moment of sky observed without urgency. A book that reorganizes how you see things. A walk that has no destination. These things carry no price and generate no content worth posting. But they meet something actual in you, because they are not transactions. They are not about acquiring. They are simply about being here. That is the unfiltered gift Schopenhauer left behind. The more we desire, the more we suffer. See it clearly, and you are already part-way free. And if this moved something in you, stay with me and subscribe to the channel.